Hello, I'm Steve. A little about myself. I'm a retired law enforcement officer with 20 years of service. I began my career in the jail, worked the road, and became an investigator. During my career, my training consisted of everything from SWAT to becoming a state certified crime scene technician. I've investigated crimes from thefts to homicides. After retiring and becoming aware of true crime and web sleuths, I started my channel for web sleuths to better understand the perspectives of law enforcement. Not only do we cover true crime, I go out into the field and assist families who have lost loved ones to homicide and their cases are considered cold. Join me as we look and bring attention to these critical cases. Hello, everyone. Glad you're able to join us tonight. If you're new to the channel, welcome. We appreciate you being here. And as we proceed with the presentation and everything, you'll be in chat. If you have any questions, throw them in there. Be respectful of families, mods, and each other. And Mrs. Steve here will be getting everybody's questions in order. So after the presentation, I will answer all the questions that I absolutely can. And want to give a big shout out to Chris, Mob Crew, for slinging his people over here to us. We appreciate that. It means a lot to us as we work and collaborate with Chris and unearth secrets, and we go out and work some cold cases and things. It's absolutely remarkable what we can do working as a team. But just want to thank everybody's involvement and appreciate everybody being here tonight. If you, of course, with this case here, if you have any information, you have to get this pulled up here, about this case, who is responsible for the homicide of Madison, Kaylee, Ethan, and Zana, absolutely make sure law enforcement has that information, for the fact that for us to have justice and for the families, that it's important that they have all the information. So if you have information that you don't know if law enforcement has that currently, absolutely make sure that you make them aware of that. Okay. While I was doing some research and trying to come up with some of the information for this presentation in response to a lot of emails and messages I get, one of the things is that a lot of people were talking about the circumstantial evidence and some of the information of that there's really not that much out there. Well, News Nation had an interview with Kaylee's father, just came out, and inside that interview, it absolutely changed my opinion of where this case is. For the fact that Steve, Kaylee's father, presented some information in regarding of the ability of the prosecutions of moving forward with the case, and that of their confidence level of where it would be, and that they would be able to get a conviction. And therefore, looking at that interview, listening to it, and as he presented that information, being from that investigative world of working homicides and talking to other investigators, and in my career watching the advancement of technologies, and then where we're at now currently with everything that goes on, and how certain criminals try to outsmart the system by either deactivating their phones or such as we have in this case with Kohberger pre-crime, and then coming back online post-crime. That there's a lot of things going on out there. But through this interview with News Nation with Steve, there were some revelations made that are absolutely has changed my perspective about what is the strongest evidence. And it's not going to be so much the DNA, but we're going to go through the 10 things that I believe will absolutely have an impact on this case, as far as the narrative that the prosecution, as they move through the trial, that will be made aware of. And of course, there's no certain order of the 10 things of evidence I'm going to be looking at tonight. People will weigh each part of it differently, but I don't have any great order, other than that the number 10 one is something that I was not aware of. I always suspected it, but did not realize that it was going to be at the level of what possibly and what will it have on the future investigation of all homicides, because I believe it's going to be at that level. If you go by what Steve released in that interview. And if you haven't seen the News Nation interview, absolutely go and watch it. But anyway, a lot of this case is just a circumstantial evidence that you look at the DNA that's, while it's belongs to Kohberger, and it is on a knife sheath that was found at the crime scene. Of course, there's a lot of ways that that knife sheath could have been at the crime scene, and how did it get there? How did his DNA get on it? And of course, the defense will have their narrative. Law enforcement has this, but throughout all the evidence, it's just one small piece of the puzzle, and it can be strongly suggestive, and it helps for people to draw inferences about a fact or the events that took place. And that's what we have to do, is that prosecution is going to weave together all this evidence. And as you'll see as we move forward, of course, we have the DNA statistical match to from the DNA on the sheath at the crime scene of being Kohberger's. So I just numbered it number one because that's probably the number one talking point of almost everyone out there of how did that come to be? Why was it there? What would be the explanation from the defense of how would they overcome that? And it is a huge problem. And I always, like I said, I gave this probably one of the higher pieces of evidence that be most conclusive in this case as we move forward, and it will be, for the fact that of the DNA profiles, and there's a couple of unknown ones out there too. And so that kind of takes away from this, that if we don't have all the DNA profiles of everyone that's in that house, it does open a door of opportunity for the defense to come in and kind of throw a wedge in there between a conviction and a jury reaching that conclusion. So I was always a little scary of that. But like I said, with the new revelations made by Steve, it has changed my opinion that there's far more out there that we have to get a better understanding of. Of course, we had the witness that was in the house that law enforcement in their probable cause affidavits, that as they addressed this issues and they mentioned it in the search warrants and the arrest warrants of what was and how did that witness come into having the ability to describe him and what was going on at a certain point during the evening or the morning hours when the homicides occurred, and that she was able to describe a certain about his bushy eyebrows and everything. And then law enforcement went into the narrative about the traffic stop and from the DNA, that you can look and see that that's one physical characteristic that they noted, along with the phone data and the tracking of Kohberger. So there's a lot of little tentacles out there that weave together, and it's absolutely fascinating. And I can't wait to see how the prosecution in their charts and their presentation methods, that they will be able to tell this story to a jury and make it absolutely something that might possibly, like I said, lead to a conviction or possibly a plea deal, for the fact that if this last piece of information is true, there's a greater possibility now than ever, whereas there's always that possibility of DNA being thrown to the side. This other information won't be as easy to throw to the side. And this is where we're getting to the cellular pings, and not only cellular pings, but all the digital electronic tracking that occurs out there. And for the fact that Steve did make mention that during this, that he has been made aware of, and he has been told that there's a tremendous amount of confidence of certain things that went on that night, and that Steve having information that was given to him, that he's always questioned, why did he go Kohberger go to certain locations and sit there, what was he staring at? What was he looking at? Why would he leave? Why would he come back? And having said that means that they are able to track through whatever type of device, whatever type of system that's out there, the algorithms, the technical advancements through tracking, marketing, because we all know on our iPhones that there's certain apps that run foreground, there's certain apps that run in the background. And it may not even be the phone. It could be the vehicle too, because there's a lot of technologies in vehicle now that depends on what packages are in those vehicles of where they can track and put you at certain locations. And it's the world that we live in now. And what will that be, and what will we be made aware of from this trial? I think it's going to change a lot of people's opinion, just like with Snowden when he first started talking about how the government was able to track a lot of information, a lot of data, not only on American citizens, but from people around the world. And so I think we're about to get a lesson on technologies of what happens within the lower 48 as far as the tracking that occurs by all these systems. And it's going to play a huge part of this trial. I'm beginning to see that now. And from, like I said, from this interview, it has opened my eyes that, yes, there's something about to be that we're all going to be made aware of. And it may not just be the cellular pings, but that's going to be a part of it. And who will be the experts in these unknown technology of this tracking? And it's so, it's just one of those things that we're going to have to look at. Another thing is that from the Wi-Fi connections to the crime scene, that in some of the probable cause affidavit, it was mentioned that Kohberger's devices had linked up to the Wi-Fi within the residence, which is a huge, just by itself, standalone, that when you have supporting evidence, such as the other cellular pings of the 12 times plus that Kohberger had visited the area through their cellular data, to his DNA being at the residence, and that when you start putting those together just by themselves, it's a huge thing. But and as we move forward, we're going to see that when law enforcement, not only for the night of Sunday, November the 13th, when the homicides occurred, but when law enforcement was able to go in there and do that security camera canvassing of not only were the crime scene, but throughout the neighborhood and throughout the community, and even to the next state over of the campus and the area where Kohberger lived, that they were able to take all these camera views, much like what happened with the Boston bombings, of that law enforcement has the ability that they can canvass this, they get all that data, and they can weave a story. And that story, each one of these items, number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and as we go on through the others, they all weave together, and they're going to create a storyline that I think that the jury will absolutely set in awe of the information that they're receiving, and that it will play a huge part in the outcome of this case. And then also from this point on, what have we learned as a society? Because we all have security cameras, through certain companies. I've went through, I don't know how many different camera systems, trying to find which system I like best. And we still, I don't know how many we have, but those systems are out there, and I highly recommend that if you don't have any type of security camera system, absolutely get one, for the fact it can pay off and greatly in times of need, not only for yourself, but for your community. If there is such a situation that could occur, that you could play a huge part in capturing or assisting law enforcement in finding such a individual responsible for such a horrible crime. And so when you take everything that went on of the how many times that this vehicle, and of course they identify this vehicle as vehicle one, and that who owns vehicle number one, and that's going to be Kohberger. And through that knowledge and through the interactions law enforcement's had with him and his movements that night in vehicle one or in a vehicle matching the description of vehicle one, laced together with all the cellular information they have, the cameras, and that you see where this is heading to, that this is absolutely something that the defense team is going to have a huge uphill battle. And all of this is not that new, but when you look at it from the perspective that the prosecution is going to be able to weave this story, it starts going towards that. Yes, the jury may very well easily come to a certain opinion if the DNA holds up. And that was always been my biggest fear, is that the DNA wouldn't hold up. And then we did some testing. Mrs. Steve and we did some testing on the recovered shoe evidence. And this is item number 7 as far as the presentation. That this sizing, because they put it into the probable cause affidavit of this shoe print transfer from a blood stain and its recovery, that they wouldn't have included that if that sizing isn't significant. If that sizing of that shoe transfer wasn't something that is of the same shoe size as Kohberger, we wouldn't be even talking about it. It wouldn't even been in the probable cause affidavit to begin with. And the only reason it's in it is that they will be able to testify that is supporting evidence that we have a person of a certain description, certain size, certain physical characteristics, shoe size, DNA, owning a car, and all of this means something. Now, this first footprint that you see here from a blood pool, which is a synthetic blood pool that Mrs. Steve stepped in, and her first foot track transfer when she took that first step, having cast off and some of the blood spatter analysis that you would do for this shoe. You can see the direction of the shoe, and you clearly see the outline. While you can't in this shoe see a lot of detail currently, that isn't the case. That anytime you have some type of transfer such as this, and you have a saturated or oversaturation of a shoe, hand, it doesn't matter what the medium is that takes that blood stain and moves it to a surface. At some point during that travel or during the reapplication of touching one surface to another, at some point you're going to come up with almost a perfect transfer. And that's what happened now with Mrs. Steve when we were doing this test. This occurred somewhere around the 24-foot mark from the time of that deep pool, that when Mrs. Steve moved 24 feet away, that you see the print on the left. You also, even at 116 feet, as Mrs. Steve did multiple circles on the that surface, that while you can't see it on the left, but when you hit it with luminol, and we did that just for one of our presentations, older cases, about 4 or 5 months ago. And you can see that when I hit it with luminol, it comes up with absolutely something that can be measured, something that can be compared to. Now, we don't have, law enforcement hasn't released that they have that shoe, but they would be able to tell a lot about that shoe, the manufacturer most likely, of course, the shoe tread design, and also the size. And I believe that sizing will be absolutely be something noteworthy that will fall within the guidelines of the physical characteristics of Kohberger. And one interesting thing of that at the crime scene, we know that the shoe, that print transfer that they recovered was per the witness that saw Kohberger, and through her statement, it's what put law enforcement in front of there. And I would probably guess that it's going to be pretty close to that 24 foot from where um, uh, two of the victims were attacked on the second level. And to get to where this shoe recovery was at, I would not be surprised if it's not within just a few feet either way of 20 to 28 feet of where that transfer would be. And how come that while there were other shoe prints, they may not have been as clear. But that this one is the one that they noted in the PCA because it is something that they would be able to easily identify. All right. And then, of course, we have the timeline and the Kohberger's movements during critical time frames of the homicides. His phone, online pre-crime locations of where he traveled, what time he turned that phone off, where was he, what were the pings, what were the locations of it, and then the post-crime. And during that, time frame of him being offline, and this is the critical part of what Steve's interview with News Nation brings on something that there's a strong indications that even with his devices turned off, law enforcement has found the golden egg that has tracked him throughout that. Because, like I said, if it's true and it's associated with what Steve was talking about, that he has far more information than why was Kohberger returning to a certain location and what was he staring at and for what times, and what does that mean? And I think that's all got to do with the crime scene. I think that they have the information from either that car or from more likely his device. That even when he disabled that device by turning it off pre-crime and post-crime, that it may not have been developed during the probable cause, but it's something that is now that they're able to have, and they absolutely have. That's just my opinion, my speculation, but listening to Steve talk about it and relaying that information to the reporter gives me great confidence that this is going to be probably have a larger impact on the case than the DNA. And then also with that same technologies, although we have the pings on it then for the fact that there was certain information relayed that after Kohberger after his night travels and returning home, and that after 9 o'clock that morning, he returned back to the crime scene. Now, did they track him through just his phone being on, or was that through some other technology? Don't know. And so now you second guess everything that you've learned about how law enforcement has the abilities to go out and subpoena information from all these. And we know that there's a lot of subpoenas and search warrants and requests made of a lot of companies out there, and from their data fields and collection methods of why was that and what does that mean and what will it have and where will it go. So we have to weigh that and see what is going to become of that. And this, of course, is the interview I'm talking about. That during this interview, at the towards the end of it, that there's a whole other level of data being collected on people that they're unaware of. And that he also stated that even law enforcement investigators, there's going to be a lot of investigators gaining knowledge that there's a whole new other level of data and ability to track people. And is that good or bad? And of course, this isn't anything groundbreaking or something that the defense already doesn't have. They know this. It's been released through discovery. They have it. Now, Steve, of course, how he obtained it and from who, I don't know. But from his speaking about the matter during the interview, that certain people have from the prosecution and the law enforcement side of it has assured him that they have more than enough information and more than enough data and evidence that don't worry, we have it. And so, with that being said, then that's something. I mean, we don't know if is it simply from his device, or is it from that vehicle, or is it from both? I don't know. Is it something running in the background? I would imagine so, because most of us, we know how to turn off our phones. And we take it for granted that when that phone's off, that it may, or that we don't worry about what's data is being collected. But I think that we're going to be surprised after this trial exactly how law enforcement and what accesses they have. I can remember back when we first started becoming aware of the technologies out there. In the late 80s and 90s of when my career and my CSI introduction was made, and when we started getting certified in those fields, that we didn't have a lot of technologies to work with. And I can remember the first time that they told us that if you have a homicide, submit it to a certain agency, and that they would be able to look at crime scenes through satellite imaging. And this is, 40 years ago. And, we hadn't even considered linking up crime scenes with satellite imaging back then, but we were made aware of it. And we thought that's the coolest thing you can ever imagine. And now we look back at that. And of course, that's nothing compared to what they have now and the technologies and advancements, although they're still limited. And I think that the limitations are more along the lines of certain satellites can be used in lower 48s versus other situations, and what access would they give law enforcement to that technology. But found that fascinating. And then there's one other thing. This is just a little extra that's in addition to the top 10 things, I think, and there's other things out there, but I just limited it for the fact trying to keep the presentation down to around 30 minutes, is that there's another thing that I believe absolutely could play a part in it. And I've mentioned it before, and I think it will play a part in it, that in front of that crime scene, if those skid marks, acceleration marks, wherever how they were made, and we know law enforcement paid interest to those before the fact they was out there photographing, and if they were able to photograph, not so much just to link the tire by being similar design, but the compounds, all that can be forensically looked at, analyzed, because tires from specific vehicles, each vehicle is driven in different environments that is specific to you, that when you travel daily, you go through certain environments daily, and you pick up certain elements, and from even your home, even in your carport, that all that information and all those compounds and all the other forensically discoverable evidence can be found in those tires, and it puts it to your car and to you. Now, were they able to track that? I don't know, but I'm hoping that that will be part of this, and and that it very well could be, for the fact that they went out there and they collected the samples from that tire. We may have that even also as supporting evidence, because it would be huge that if we have the DNA profile of a person that owns a vehicle, tire tracks, skid marks being left out in front of the residence during a specific time frame that is critical to being that it's the offender being in the area at a specific time, then that's huge. Just by itself, just the DNA and the tire. It doesn't matter if you have any of the other evidence. And just those two things that you have a suspect's DNA profile inside the house. You have the vehicle tire compounds in front of the residence. Not saying that they have identified them from coming from Kohberger's, but if that does come to be the case, just those two elements by themselves will have a huge impact on this case. All right. We got any questions?
You got a few.
All right. I want to thank everybody for being with us, and appreciate y'all in chat.
All right, let's see here. And from Perry, there were reports of a prowler in bushes by a neighbor at 2 a.m. on the 12th. Will LE have gone back over these types of incidents?
Absolutely. And not only that, but they would have also, through the cellular pings, devices, Wi-Fi, all the digital, everything that would have happened on the from the time of the homicide and working on the homicide, that they would go out there and canvass not only the neighborhoods, but they'd canvass the departments, and in not just this one location, but in other areas also, for the fact that it's known that offenders, as BTK made it, everyone aware of, that he had multiple targets at any one time, and he would work them. And so you could have this, that certain individuals have certain habits, and prowling is one of them, and that may well be the case. Now, law enforcement would look at it. If it supports the case, we'll see it. We'll see it during the trial. If it doesn't support the case for the prosecution, we may see it in trial presented by the defense.
Okay. And Southern Gal True Crime at True Crime Web. My aunt was a juror on a homicide case years ago, and she said cell tower info was a big part of their decision to convict.
Absolutely, and it's getting. And like I said, I don't even know what this newest tracking ability of what they're talking about from what Steve's interview was, but yes, and it's only going to get. We haven't seen where technology is going yet. Uh, uh, while some of the younger generations have always uh, had these devices, and they think it's something common, our older generations,
You looking at me? What?
we um, we didn't get to see this in our youth, and so we never appreciated. But we've seen how fast it's moving forward, and it's not going to slow down. And not just the cell tower technologies, but everything is going to hit a fast pace.
And from Junior, I thought his cell phone was turned off. Could it still connect to Wi Fi?
I don't know if it's Wi-Fi. I don't know what it is, but whatever Steve has been made aware of, and whatever Steve released during that News Nation interview, that when he, you know, he had mentioned earlier in the interview, and I found it quite interesting when he was kept talking about why would he go back? What was he looking at? And that was indicative. And I thought, like you, that and it may very well be Wi-Fi. I don't know, but there may be some type of app that reaches out that we're not aware of, that reaches out to Wi-Fi. But it also may be that there's another whole new other technologies, some type of program running in the back on some of these newer phones. Don't know, or it could be the vehicle itself. Um, but there's something connecting with something that allows, from what I took from this. Now, y'all go and listen to it in the comments and everything. Let me know if there's a different angle or perspective on that. But that's what I took from it. That there's a lot of information out there, a lot of tracking that went on that night of Kohberger. And well, how could that be if his phone was turned off? How could that be? And that they have a whole lot of confidence in this case, and they have a whole lot of data. And how can that be?
And from Kamala, do we know if they're going to let cameras in during the trial?
I don't know. I hadn't looked at what was it would if they're going to allow them or not. I don't know that. Good question.
We
I
hope
hope it.
so.
I hope so. I hope so. Because if they are, I'm gonna be on. I'm gonna watch it, and hopefully, I'll have good enough internet that I can uh, share with y'all during the trial.
All right. And left to hunt. Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Steve. How's your latest edition doing? Triple Alt.
Yeah, triple up.
Triple Alt is doing fantastic. At Steve, I hope you figure out how some people who are not so smart do the dumbest things. Data be like, duh, I can still see you.
And that, like I said, that's a double-edged sword for the fact that while we have criminals that have committed crimes that never knew, and of course, if you look at the time frame and the timeline of when, if Kohberger is the one and he is actually responsible for this crime, like I said, always everybody's innocent until proven guilty. But if he is the one responsible for this crime, and he turned off his phone pre-crime and turned it back on post-crime, which, what are the odds of that just by themselves? But now that if there's other technologies out there, if there's other programs, there's other abilities by the government or by marketers or whoever is running these programs to track when a phone's on or off, don't know, but that while it's great and Kohberger didn't know about it, but as Steve said, that there's going to be a lot of investigators being made aware of a whole other level of data being collected on people. What does that mean? What is that whole other level of data, and how is it being done that would allow you to see certain movements? So I find it extremely interesting.
Okay. And Miss Miranda at True Crime Web, can you build a replica crime scene and prove to the naysayers that the crime can be committed in 7 to 8 minutes or less? You ain't building no two-story house.
I know.
Love you.
Yeah. The I would try to do the transitions. I have staircases, and so I could. Yes, I'll work on that. I have a staircase, and I'll be able to do some. I won't be able to do the blood spatter inside the staircases
No.
or anything, but we will.
No.
But
No.
yes, that's a good idea. Thank you.
Right. And Southern Gal True Crime, why do you think you went back the next morning?
There could be a couple of things. Either he discovered, did I drop that knife sheath outside the crime scene, or um, why wasn't it? Just like with arsonists, sometimes they'll come back and watch the response of the emergency services. They'll come back and watch the first responders. They feed off of their fantasy of the people that are standing around watching this. And did he want to come and relive what his actions of that night? Did he want, and was part of his fantasy, um, feeding off of the reactions of these people in mourning or in shock or just in awe of how a crime could be? Um, there's a lot of different reasons that these offenders, when you talk about psychopaths and or anyone that is capable of committing this type of crime, of why they would do certain things and why would they return. And some of it's just due to that they feed off of that fear that they bring into a community. BTK, he would continuously bring up his name in the newspaper so that, he fed off of that. He wanted it to be the talk of the town. And was it for that he could interact and have conversations and within his own private chuckles about what he was able to do, and people were none the wiser of who he was and what part he played. There's a lot of different reasons.
All right. And blue light for
Kamala.
Miss Kamala.
$20. If this goes to trial, do you think BK would be cocky enough to take the stand with those evil eyes, like Mrs. Steve would say? No, I don't think he will. It's possible. I mean, if he does a Ted Bundy, it's possible if he's in that type of offender, which his personality appears to be along that. So you could be absolutely right, but it would be against a lot of professional advice from his attorneys, I'm sure, because you don't want to take the stand against a confident prosecutor that has tons of evidence. But with what I've learned in the last 24 hours, I'm feeling really good about the case right now.
All right. And unearthed secrets at True Crime Web. Between the 2 basement staircases and 2 first to second floor staircases at my place, you could figure out how to recreate this for a time test.
Oh, yes. And like I said,
Now, would they let you use blood spatter at their place?
Well, they have a very, yes, they all have a very nice, I'll send you an email.
Oh.
I'll teach you unearthed secrets.
No kidding. And from Cincy Wackadoodle at True Crime Web. When you think of all the apps and sites that want permission to access your photos, audio, calls, video, etc., who knows what is going to be being tracked?
And a lesson that we
That's
should have
scary.
learned, even with Snowden, was as he ran from continent to continent, that not only did he turn off his device, move batteries, and all this back when you could, and where is the technologies now, and what is the abilities of these corporations, which are just as powerful, if not more powerful, than the government, because the government has steps that have to be taken to get through certain things, whereas these huge companies can develop these services and abilities and these devices, and that have very little regulation. And so you're exactly right. What is and what permissions and how do they circumvent everything to be able to track people? I think we're about to get a lesson in that. I absolutely do. I think that we're all going to get a lesson in from the court system on this case.
Okay. And from Dave, would the skid marks make a difference if the car was front wheel drive? I am assuming that car was.
No, I don't think it will. If there are acceleration marks, or if they're, someone locked it down, which I don't know if you can even leave skid marks anymore with the anti-locking brakes. So it would be more likely it would be acceleration, unless it's an extremely older model car, which we know that's not the case. But if there's any ice, or which there wasn't much snow, so I would lean more towards it would be acceleration, and it's the but it's the recovery of those compounds, that rubber, and hopefully, and I'm sure they did. I'm not sure, but I expect that the CSI would have collected samples, just like you swab a blood stain for collecting. You would also do the same thing as for collecting the compounds, and not only of the skid mark itself, but also of the road surface. You'd go to another area and you'd get those other collections, so that the lab would be able to perform all their tests.
And from D Mead 51063, when they check the car for can I say blood?
Yes.
Blood. Do they take off the panel inside the car door also to look for it?
I would expect so, for the fact that most of the time with CSI, part of our training is that while a lot of people try to clean up, and some of them do an excellent job at cleaning, but during that process, they, with their chemicals or with their water, that they uh, rehydrate that blood, and then they push it up into crevices and little holes and areas that will run down into areas that are unable to be cleaned. And it doesn't matter if it's your kitchen floor and you're mopping it, and you push, as you know, whenever you're cleaning the floor, that while you're absolutely uh, covering the blood stain, but you're moving that blood also. You may not be moving all of it, but you're moving parts of it, and parts of it can hold that DNA profile. And if you push that mop over there to some of the molding, molding on the floor, or some type of duct work in your house, that it can get into areas that you wouldn't uh, expect it to be. You wouldn't be able to see it, and CSI will go in there and check those areas and get into those areas where blood could be pushed to during the cleaning process. So yes, they would look for a lot of different areas that possibly it could have been pushed to.
All right. And Junior, a little off topic, but do you have any idea who the cowboys that searched the house could have been?
I don't think those were really cowboys, but I do think that they were of a certain task force. That at the time that occurred, I think they already had identified who Kohberger was, and I think more than likely that was at least some of the surveillance teams, or certain people that had power um, over those surveillance teams. That's who I think those guys were. Um, is it going to be U.S. Marshals? Don't know. There's a lot of, but I would expect more than likely it would have been some of the federal boys. But that's just my first impression of them when I saw them walking out. Um, and for the fact that uh, you can't have, if you put anyone under surveillance, you can't have people that stand out like a sore thumb. You have to have people that fit in society in that part of the world. And so, whatever community it would be, that's who are parts of those teams. And I'm just guessing on that, but that's who I expect those guys were.
Okay. And from Cincy, could his car's GPS question mark?
Yeah, well, there's when I first looked at that model car, you can go in there and see what type of systems are in that car, and some of those car models, even their radio systems, and there's a lot of radio um, networks out there. Some of them are pay, that you have to pay to be able to access that, but they still track those vehicles. And is that going to be something that, and we have, is it something that's accessible, that if you take that radio and you have whatever encryption or about that radio, are they able to track that? It's possible. But I know that when I was doing the research on that vehicle, some of those model cars did have certain accessibility to where you could have certain apps and listen to certain networks if you pay. And are they able to reverse engineer and track? I would expect so.
All right. And from Wanda, did BK Carr have OnStar?
And this is another one of those technologies that out there that they may be able to tap and go in there. Um, and I don't know. When I was looking at that, I don't remember seeing OnStar as being part of those models. Doesn't mean it wasn't, but I don't remember seeing that being an option. I do remember that the radio had certain apps on it, but I don't remember about OnStar being part of it. And someone owning that model may know.
All right. And from Jackie, they say there is a lot of evidence against Kohberger. if he studied criminology, why would he leave evidence that could link him to the crime? Did he want to be caught?
No, he didn't want. No, these individuals, offenders, none of them want to be caught. There's no such thing as a perfect crime. No matter what you do uh, to minimize that a crime scene and the transfer of evidence, there's always the possibility that you're not going to be able to meet your standards. And it's extremely hard for the fact that um, how do you go into a sterile environment of dressing out and being able to go into a crime scene and then come back into an environment and sterilize yourself before you get back in your vehicle? I was surprised that there was no DNA from the residents found in the car. Um, I know there's certain methods that could have been taken to minimize that DNA transfer. And did he do that? I expect so. And evidently he did it well enough that the defense team can say that there was no DNA from the crime scene found in his car, which is surprising to me, but it doesn't mean it's not there. They may have just not found it yet.
Oh, me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, trying to stay caught up is not overly easy tonight. Okay.
You can do it.
And from Eliza, question: what do you think of them tearing down the house December 28th?
I think it's absolutely nuts for the fact that no matter how well in my whole life I've ever have been briefed on any situation or any crime scene, that once I traveled to that location, I was able to discover things that I wouldn't have uh, that didn't meet and the expectations of the visitation being far superior to the briefing. For the fact that while you may be able to describe certain things, you can't describe until you sit there and you look and you are downstairs and you hear someone walking upstairs, you hear someone talking upstairs. The type of technologies are brought into the courtroom, um, 3D imaging, all the faro scans, whatever they're using, and they bring out there. Don't care how it's there. It's different than visiting the scene. And as Chris mentioned in his show tonight, was a great example that the in the Murdoch homicide of the jury being able to go there and verify certain things with their eye and seeing the scene and being able to visually and physically visit it, it had a huge impact on their decision. And I'm dead against them tearing down the house on December 28th.
All right. And from Diane, did DoorDash driver see the car as it circled or even leaving? Could he have identified him in the car?
I think if he had, we would have that information. Not that it's necessary that we would have it, but I think that they would have absolutely included that in the PCA. They just did, but we don't have that information. And so doesn't mean that DoorDash driver didn't meet him. Doesn't mean that DoorDash driver doesn't have a camera that caught him, and it's part of the security footage canvassing that they did. Just don't know. But whatever images or whatever, he may have met a car and just didn't recognize it, didn't pay any attention. Because how many cars does a DoorDash driver meet per night? And there wouldn't have been anything that stood out to him at that moment. And so if there had been anything, he would have called 911. So we know that there was nothing that stood out to him at the moment of while he was in the area.
All right. And Cockney Kez at True Crime Web, what do you think the likelihood is that his DNA is on at least one victim?
I believe it would be. I think there's something, maybe not his DNA, but there's something from within his environment that is on those victims. Um, Hopefully, it would be DNA, but it's hard to find DNA. It's hard to find hair, fiber, uh, things from the suspects. It's not that easy. But from his own personal environment that he brought into the scene, that's the whole basis of Lacard's principle, that you bring things from your environment into that crime scene, and you take things from that environment, from that crime scene, back to your environment. And now, of course, you can uh, take certain measures to reduce those, and evidently he was successful in that.
You got a couple questions on the chair.
Sure.
Do you want to tell them that you found it in Texas, but if you got it closer?
I think we have a Texas and New York. If you have any information on the chair I'm looking for specifically in reference to one of my cold cases, send me an email on that and send me a picture of it.
A little closer than Texas.
Yeah, if you got anything closer in Texas or New York, absolutely let me know, because there's certain testing I have to do on that cold case to proceed. And I appreciate that, guys. Thank y'all for working on that for me.
All right. And from Eliza, question: do you think LE might be sharing more evidence with Steve G and not media just to help him know they have the right person? I mean, to help him in a way.
Absolutely. And they should.
They should.
What this family has lost and what all these families have lost is something that is unimaginable. And law enforcement, of course, Steve doesn't want to do anything to harm the case, and he wants justice, and he's going to protect his little girl. If you listen to this to the best of his ability and for the fight for justice for his little girl, if you listen to this, and he explains it. And but yes, I think they do that to make him able to wake up in the morning and get through the day. Absolutely.
Okay, let's see here. 7. All right. Okay. And from Diane, they believe the shoe print could be DM's, as the shoes taken from the house is felt to be from her room. So could she have left it when seeing the victim?
Well, they put it in the probable cause affidavit now what the speculation from other rumors and everything, but law enforcement put it in there for a reason, and they put that shoe size in there for a reason. Now, have they discovered and released more information saying it's not? And is her shoe and Kohberger's footprint the same size? But at the time, that shoe print, and like I say, they put it in that probable cause affidavit for a reason of to explain something. And I think it's more towards the suspect versus a witness.
All right. And from Tumbleweed, how would the jury visualize the Pharaoh 3D scene? Is it projected in the court on a screen, or is there a model?
We got to see some of that during the Murdoch case, that you could see it, and it was just 2D imaging. Now, as far as doing the 3D, then of course you'd have to have, and I know at some point that technology will be brought into the courtroom. And what will it look like when it is brought into the courtroom, and what will the hearings and the motions and everything that will have to get us to that point, and for the court to allow such a thing. I just don't know. But from the Murdoch, everything was just 2D imaging from what I saw on it. But I believe at some point you will have these halo type of crime scene presentations.
All right. And blue light for Southern Gal True Crime.
Thanks as always for all the great info. Thank you. And I want to thank Southern Gal True Crime for co-hosting my show the other night with me. If you haven't checked her out, absolutely do so. We thank her.
All right, and you are done.
All right, guys. Well, I appreciate y'all being here tonight. If you have any questions, send me an email and make comments and let me know what y'all think about Steve's interview also. And I appreciate it. And let's see, what else? You got anything going
You
on?
may not be here Tuesday.
Yes. I've got some traveling to do. So I'm going to be on the road. And we may only have one or two more shows. Well, we're almost at the end of the year. So a lot of things are going on. And if I don't get to see y'all before the holidays, y'all have a great Christmas and y'all stay safe out there. Enjoy your time with your families. And I'll be looking forward to the next year where we got a lot of stuff going on. But in the meantime, guys, y'all stay safe out there.
Love y'all. You gonna leave it on that screen?
No.
Thank you, mods. Couldn't do it without you.